It's great to see water lettuce becoming more popular in the aquarium hobby. I've always loved the large floating rosette with its long trailing roots, but beyond its aesthetics, this plant actually offers a huge range of different benefits for your aquarium, making everything as easy as possible if you're a beginner. Unfortunately, there's quite a bit of misinformation out there about water lettuce, so I wanted to share my own guide on how you can offer the best care possible to this plant, and in return this plant will take very good care of your aquarium. So I want to start by clarifying exactly what water lettuce is. In this particular tank on screen, it's the larger floating plant that you can see, and the smaller one is regular duckweed. Water lettuce is significantly bigger than duckweed, which actually makes it a lot easier to manage in your aquarium. Like Amazon frogbit, it also has long trailing roots that float beneath the surface. Now, while these roots do add a jungle-like aesthetic to your tank, they also provide several practical benefits. My shrimp and snails love grazing on the algae, biofilm and trapped food that ends up getting onto these roots, but in addition to that, my Medaka rice fish also love to leave their eggs all over them too. And on top of that, water lettuce is typically very easy to find and very affordable because it's so popular in the hobby compared to some other less common floating plants. So moving on, and we get to the water parameter requirements of the plant, and this is where there's a lot of misinformation in the hobby. Many sources just copy whatever Wikipedia says, unfortunately, and Wikipedia often gets it wrong. One example of this is the pH range for this plant, with Wikipedia and a lot of the copying sources listing it as between 6.5 and 7.2, but in my experience that's far from accurate. My tap water has a pH of 6.4, and I've successfully grown water lettuce in tanks with Sirius Stone, which help buffer the KH to increase the pH of those tanks to around 7.4. In my experience, it's thrived in both conditions and had very similar performances when it comes to the growth rates, but I've even found some forum threads of other people saying they've been able to keep this plant alive with a pH of 8.2. So the key takeaway from that is that regardless of what parameters your tap water has, there's a good chance water lettuce is going to be fine in it. Moving on to water temperature, and unfortunately it's more of the same, where Wikipedia lists a suitable range of between 22 and 30 degrees Celsius or 72 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and a lot of people just copy that recommendation. The thing is, if you actually skim the research paper that Wikipedia cites for that temperature range, it actually says it's perfectly fine at way lower temperatures than that. I don't know why Wikipedia stuck with that stat. Personally, I've kept water lettuce in room temperature tanks in my fish room that go down to around 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter, and its growth rate did slow down, but it didn't melt or have any die-off, and as soon as the spring months came around, its rapid growth rate returned. In fact, water lettuce is officially listed as an invasive species here in the United Kingdom and over in Germany, and both countries get very cold and often drop below freezing outdoors during the winter, showing how hardy this plant actually is. So moving on, and we get to nitrogen compounds and water purification, and I just want to quickly say there is a supporting blog post for this video that I link to in the video description that has all of the sources for the following stats in its footnotes. So to get straight into it, water lettuce can thrive in high levels of nitrogen compounds commonly found in aquariums such as ammonia, ammonium, nitrite and nitrate, making it a great plant for brand new aquariums where there's often a lot of instability. This is actually where the plant shines in my experience, because unlike a lot of other popular plants what can have issues with high levels of ammonia and nitrite, water lettuce simply takes that excess nutrient sources and just puts it to good use for excess growth. On top of that, water lettuce is actually so good at surviving in conditions where a lot of other plants struggle. It's one of the most heavily researched aquatic plants on the planet for the phytoremediation industry. That entire industry is based around using aquatic plants to naturally purify contaminated water sources, and there is a lot of research out there on how hardy and easy to keep this plant is. So if you are brand new to the planted tank side of the hobby, water lettuce is consistently one of the best plants out there because it's just so hardy and easy to keep. On top of that though, as I mentioned earlier, it also offers several benefits on how it can naturally purify your aquarium water to keep your fish safe and overcome a lot of common mistakes beginners make. One study found that water lettuce was able to reduce ammonia levels by 95% while also reducing nitrate levels by 70% and total dissolved solid levels by 70%. Now the paper does list it as ammonia when in reality it'll be total ammonia nitrogen content in the water, meaning that ammonia is being passively converted into the less toxic ammonium from the excess hydrogen ions in the tank so the plant can absorb it. But the point is that it's doing an excellent job of naturally purifying two of the most common toxins in the hobby. A different research paper also found that water lettuce was able to directly remove up to 72% of nitrite in the test water too. Now nitrite is rarely an issue if you have a heated aquarium, but if you're on the room temperature side of the hobby, it can be a common sticking point, especially during the colder months of the year, but water lettuce will deal with it directly. In short, keeping water lettuce in our tanks lets us move up from the standard nitrogen cycle that relies on microbes and get plants into the mix as well, which I class as the intermediate nitrogen cycle, where it uses a lot of ammonium up directly at the start of the nitrogen cycle, reducing the load on the beneficial microorganisms in the tank. Now this might not sound important, but it actually offers several big advantages because it's soaking up the easiest nitrogen compound close to the start of the cycle. It actually changes a few different things in the tank. Because far smaller microorganism colonies are required to deal with the remaining ammonia and nitrite, research papers have found that adding water lettuce to a tank was able to reduce the biological oxygen demand by 93%. This same paper also found that it was able to reduce the chemical oxygen demand in the tank by 59% because the water lettuce is just absorbing so many nitrogen compounds and other TDS ions from the water column that the actual microorganisms and the various chemical reactions in the tank just don't need to take place anymore. So the good news is that there's a lot more dissolved oxygen still in the aquarium water without you needing an air stone or a sponge filter or something like that, so your fish should easily be able to breathe in your tanks. So the key takeaways for that is that water lettuce is very, very hardy and easy to keep, and adding it to your tank will overcome a lot of very common beginner mistakes in the hobby. Moving on, we get to tank requirements because unfortunately water lettuce isn't ideal for every single setup, especially when it comes to the smaller aquarium sizes. To start, the roots can get very long very quickly, and I have multiple plants with roots that are over 30 centimeters or a foot in length now. In smaller tanks like shallow bookshelf setups or smaller nano tanks, these roots can quickly become a headache. Personally, I did used to keep water lettuce in my 25 litre or 6.6 US gallon tanks, but it just took so much time consistently trimming the roots that I just removed it and I've replaced it with other floating plants now. And this is what my 30 litre or 8 US gallon portrait style tank looks like, with just a little bit of water lettuce on the surface, and you can see how much of the view the roots are obstructing in this small tank. I did used to keep it in my 45 litre or 12 US gallon tank, and personally it really didn't bother me that much in that tank, but that one is a room temperature unheated tank, so the low temperatures does slow down the growth rate. In my personal experience to what I like from my tanks, I do think the 29 gallon or 110 litre tank size is the sweet spot for water lettuce, and I have most of mine in that tank size. Not only does the larger surface area of 29 gallon tanks let the plants spread out horizontally, but the additional depth you get in that tank size also lets the roots grow and grow and grow with a lot less maintenance being required. I can perform regular plant maintenance around once a week without the water lettuce becoming a problem in this tank, which fits my overall maintenance schedule perfectly. I will be adding it to my 150 litre or 40 US gallon tank this coming weekend too, just to help balance some water parameters since I rescaped it slightly, but again, anything over that 29 gallon mark is perfect for this plant in my opinion. But I do want to stress, if you only have one aquarium, you can definitely keep this in smaller tanks where you don't have to spread your maintenance time out over an entire fish room like myself. I kept it in 25 litre or 6.6 US gallon tanks for over 6 months, but in the end it just became too much of a pain having to do maintenance on it when there's other floating plants out there that are just easier for smaller tanks. So moving on, and we get to lighting requirements, and the good news is water lettuce is very undemanding. Being a floating plant, it sits on the surface just below your aquarium light, so it gets a lot of power from the light even if you do have an underpowered system. I've successfully grown water lettuce under various light intensities ranging from very budget friendly options up to some higher end units, and it doesn't have issues, it just keeps growing. If you are new to the hobby, my personal recommendation for beginners would be the Sciora SR616. It's very affordable, it's an entry level light that works perfectly well with this plant. I've grown several water lettuce colonies in multiple tanks under it without issue. My 29-gallon tank, which currently has water lettuce in it, uses a slightly more powerful Haiger 957, and my new 8-gallon Betterfish tank runs an even more powerful Chihiros A2. But to be clear, these more powerful lights aren't on these tanks for the water lettuce. There's other plants in there that either require higher lighting or I want them to turn red, so I've chosen higher lighting. You really can use an entry-level, budget-friendly light and it will grow. And in case you're wondering, I just set the lights to maximum intensity for 6 hours per day and let the built-in timer on them do the rest. I will drop some affiliate links to those lights in the video description, but honestly, if you're sticking with easy category plants, you don't need to overpay. Just go with the more affordable Sciora SR616, it's a great bit of kit. So moving on, and we get to nutrients and fertilization, and there's a bunch of different ways you can go about this, and in my honest opinion, on the low tech side of the hobby, a lot of people just overcomplicate it for absolutely no reason. Since water lettuce is a floating plant, we don't need to worry about the nutrient levels in our substrate because it's going to be drawing most of its nutrients from the water column. Again, because it's a floating plant, it's on the surface of the water, so it also has easy access to atmospheric CO2, so it'll pull that from the air and pretty much everything else it needs from the water column. So we don't need to worry about using root tabs or CO2 injection or anything like that for this plant to thrive. It is very easy to keep. Now, I have seen some sources recommend liquid fertilization for water lettuce, but in all honesty, if you're setting your tank up in a similar way to me, there's just no need, it's just an extra cost. Personally, I'm a very big fan of natural fertilization and I use it in all of my tanks now. It's commonly known as the fish poop fertilization method too, and I link to a dedicated article I've got on it in the video description. But the concept is very straightforward. You basically feed your fish a high quality fish food. Your fish then produces waste, and the waste and any leftover fish food decompose, and as the waste-eating bacteria decompose it, they remineralize the content of the organic matter into the water column and the plants use it as nutrients. This method not only works perfectly fine for me with water lettuce, but I keep a lot of different plants in my aquariums and it works perfectly fine with them. If you're new, don't go out buying liquid fertilizers and stuff. You can get great results without CO2, without liquid fertilizers, and just sticking to an entry-level light. Modern lighting technology is excellent. And I know plenty of other low-tech aquarium keepers on the plant and tank side of the hobby using the same systems with various plants, including water lettuce, and they get great results too. Moving on, and we get to propagation, and like most floating plants in the hobby, water lettuce is incredibly easy to propagate. As it grows, the adult plants send out their little stolon runners, and at the end of each of these, a little plantlet will start to form, and then over the course of a couple of weeks it'll grow into an adult plant. Then each of these new plants repeat the same process where they'll start to throw out stolons and runners to create new little plantlets. They become adult plants and then they throw their stolons out, and it just keeps going and going and going. This means that there's no need to go out and buy a lot of water lettuce. You can buy the smallest, most affordable pack you can find in your area, leave it to do its thing in your tank, and it will quickly propagate. I actually have a great example from one of my recent tank setups because I added 4 water lettuce plants to one of my new Betterfish tanks, and within 7 days it had propagated to cover half of the surface of the aquarium without me doing anything. Now, it is worth noting that propagation speed will depend on things like water temperature and available nutrient levels and stuff like that, but in the vast majority of aquariums, water lettuce is going to be a very fast grower. And that fast growth rate means there's a lot of maintenance required too, so I do want to touch on maintenance for the plant. In my tanks, I usually stick to a once a week maintenance schedule when it comes to trimming my plants, and I literally just grab fistfuls of water lettuce until around 25% of the tank surface is still covered in it, and I just let it regrow over the coming week. This balance has been ideal in my tanks because it lets light penetrate to the submerged plants while also letting the water lettuce grow to make sure that we get all of the water purification benefits across the following week as well. But you can adjust this to meet your specific setup if needed. For example, if the nutrient and lighting levels in your tank result in a slightly slower growth rate, you might want to just remove it to around 50% of the surface of your tank and then leave it to grow at a slower rate. On the flip side, if you have a lot of nutrients in your water and a decent light, then you might want to reduce the water lettuce below 25%, maybe even to just 10% of surface coverage, and then let it grow out over the coming week again. But the main thing to keep in mind is that thankfully, with water lettuce, it's big enough for you to stick your hand in the tank and just grab it and remove it. You don't need anything like a comb to manage duckweed because of its smaller size. Maintenance is very quick and easy. Now I do want to quickly touch on giant water lettuce and regular water lettuce because I do see some confusion out there. You will see both of these plants listed for sale on various platforms, but it's very important to note that they are the exact same species. Don't be fooled into buying giant duckweed because you think it's a different plant or that it performs at a higher level or anything like that. It is literally the exact same plant. The only difference is the size of the plant, which comes down to how long the keeper has had that plant grown. While water lettuce will propagate very quickly and get to a decent size fast, getting up to that giant water lettuce size can sometimes take years, so that's what you're paying for, the additional time required to get it to that bigger size. If you have a pond or a massive aquarium, then this might be worth it for you, but I'm personally more on the nano tank side of the hobby, so there's just no need for me to get the giant water lettuce. Sticking with the more affordable and easier to find regular water lettuce is better for me. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. Thanks for watching, have a good day and good luck with your water lettuce plants in your tanks.